This is the 7th tape or videotape that I'm making on behalf of the book 21 Steps to Nirvana. And I'm wondering whether these tapes are helping or just confusing matters. I want to talk about Nirvikalpa, and Nirvikalpa seems to suggest silence of the mind. And as far as I'm concerned, that's as good a definition as any. If you go to the internet, I'm sure you'll find a definition that's different to mine, or perhaps a definition that's more sophisticated in analyzing the words that constitute Nirvikalpa. From my understanding, Vikalpa means concepts, and Nirvikalpa means free of concepts. And that's a good definition. It's a workable definition, a working definition, and allows us to proceed. Is it the final definition? And the answer is no. But the point is, of course, that words as we know it are just markers for things that cannot be expressed in words. Obviously, every word is inadequate if you use the word for it's a sunny day. And I know that if you say it's a sunny day in a snow country, then it means one thing. And perhaps if you say it's a sunny day in a tropical country, it means something else. So each word is indicative of the environment in which it is used and the sense in which it is used. Sometimes the sense in which a word is used can change the entire meaning of it. And I want you to take the same thinking, what we have just discussed, because we are all familiar with words and how they don't always work. So if words don't always work, and words can mean many things, many different things, in different contexts, think about concepts. We have to take whatever we know about words and also apply it to concepts. And Needless to add, the word represents a concept. So really, when we were discussing words, we were discussing concepts. And the question then is that why Nirvikalpa? And the answer is free of concepts, liberated from, or the negative of, or not having concepts. Seems to indicate that kind of negativity, negative existence or non-existence. So really, Nirvikalpa is the non-existence of concepts, or freedom from concepts. And well, I think we spent enough time defining the word Nirvikalpa, and we started from the concept of words always not meaning what we think they mean, and finally we decided that words and concepts are pretty much the same thing, and the words, in a sense, are a attempt at trying to define consciousness, these concepts that exist in consciousness. And so now we are taking it a third step, and we are talking about states of consciousness. So words lead to concepts, concepts leads to states of consciousness, and my hope or prayer, my desire, in this case, my request to you is to see this. And by seeing this, you can understand Nirvikalpa perhaps more clearly. So when we are talking about freedom from concepts, we are talking about freedom from states of consciousness. And of course, the key over here is that we have the ability to name NAME, that makes us intelligent creatures. The easiest naming might be saying something is useful or not useful. Even just by using the word useful, we are encapsulating a concept, and that concept is quite a complex concept, where the state of consciousness itself is being modified to reflect that this can be used further. In other words, you're not stuck, and you're not at a dead end. And if consciousness goes into a dead end, if consciousness does in fact become locked, then it's considered not useful. So, useful, not useful, is a very basic concept coming from the ability of consciousness to see a way through it, to use this information, to manipulate this information and not to get stuck. And we love this as human beings. We love going on thinking jags, that is, thinking adventures. And of course we call this daydreaming. Sometimes it is called giving a speech or a lecture like I am doing right now. And so the question is that are you finding this useful? Are you finding that this is shutting down thought? Or are you finding that this is helping you think further? And of course the intelligent thing to do is to think further and deeper about certain concepts, and the idea is that that's why you go to the Guru, because the Guru can teach you. But what is the Guru, at least in the spiritual world, supposed to teach you? And the counterintuitive answer is yes. He wants you to learn how to become useless. And how does he do that? And of course, one possible way, there are many, I would say dozens of possible ways to shut down the mind. But one possible way is to realize the limitations of the mind, that the mind, or intelligence as we call it, analysis, is not the ultimate intelligence. So what is the ultimate intelligence? The ultimate intelligence is beyond concepts, beyond thinking, beyond intelligence, and certainly beyond something so primitive as words and thoughts. Of course, I cannot give you that state of mind, at least not through the video, but I can indicate it or point towards it, or in a larger sense give you some access to it. And that's what we are trying to do here. This lecture, if that is what it is a complete and total failure if it gets you to think deeper. And one of the giveaways, something that will tell you that that's the direction it is leading, is you feel you acquire something, that you have something. That's just ego strengthening, isn't it? That it makes you feel, wow, I'm clever, I can figure things out. And, in a real sense, I'm better than other people because I can figure things out. And I figured out that I have to watch this YouTube video and sit through it, however painful it is. And so that makes me a better person. And but obviously, that's not what we are aiming for in Nirvikalpa. In Nirvikalpa, we are aiming at a situation that is free of concepts, free of states of consciousness. And one of the strongest states of consciousness that we are used to is called mind. And mind is just a way of saying, this consciousness is mine. I have won this consciousness by deep thinking, reading, practice, by being who I am. But who I am is the definition of ego. At least ego is what I believe I am. So what if you are not? What if you have no sense of who you are? And of course, there are some good examples of that. And one of the examples one reads from scripture, of course, Sanskrit yogic scripture mentions this sometimes, that the space within the jar is the same as the space outside the jar. So you are asked to imagine perhaps a clay pot as may have existed a few thousand years ago when this was written. And you know that the clay pot is easily broken. I mean, if you were to drop it, chances are it would break, especially if you were to drop it when it were full of water or something like that. But the point, of course, here is that you can make the mistake of thinking this clay pot is you. And that's the ego. It contains this consciousness, and this consciousness is the same within and without, inside and outside the jar. And in fact, breaking the jar seems to make no difference to that space that you had claimed as your own. So the jar seems to define you as a person, but the jar is not the person. It is what is contained within the jar that is the person. And when we look closely, we find that what is contained within the jar is exactly the same as what is contained or what is found outside the jar. There is no difference. So suddenly this whole idea is beginning to fall together without concepts. We started Nirvikalpa, the definition, the working definition, as without concepts. So, we are talking about pure consciousness. If the consciousness has no concepts to restrict it, that's Nirvikalpa, free of concepts. And we shouldn't forget that concepts require consciousness. We need to be aware of these concepts. And the way we become aware of these concepts is by bringing it to consciousness. Consciousness is the same as awareness. Awareness is the same as being awake or being conscious. So, in normal, everyday, day-to-day language, we say, well, I was completely unconscious. I was in deep, deep sleep, dreamless sleep, and I was completely unconscious. But then I struggled awake, and I became conscious. I became aware of the environment I was in. And of course, before you become aware of the environment you were in, you became aware of yourself, of the I, of yourself as a person, as a being. So you can see that the word concepts has taken us pretty far, and where we seem to have landed up is there is a basic concept on which all other concepts are based, and that basic concept is the I. And it helps to think of this I as a clay pot, an easily breakable clay pot. And I'd like you to think of you taking a hammer and breaking the clay pot. What happens?